With April winding down, let's take stock of the state of the Pacers. What do they need to do next? Whose development is important? What do they need to add? And who better to do it with than Howard Beck, one of the best longtime NBA scribes with the Locked On Network for the next few months. We'll get to all of it today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in to another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, fun conversation with none other than Howard Beck, currently writing about the NBA for GQ with the Locked On Network for the next few months, about the state of the Pacers, what they need to do next roster-wise, whose development is important, the importance of setting a foundation versus going for it. We get to all of it, the Pacers' direction, on a very fun and wide-ranging conversation today. So let's just jump right in. We are now joined by Howard Beck. You may know him from the most niche words in basketball podcasting. You may know him from his many stops around the world of covering basketball. Currently with GQ Sports, which for a Pacers podcast, Howard, that is where we have to start the infamous 2013-14 Pacers GQ shoot that changed the team. They were 42-13. They go 14-13 the rest of the way after it comes out. They limp through the Hawks in the first round. GQ and the Pacers butting heads for all of time, Howard.
Wow. Thank you for that trip down NBA niche photo memory lane. Good to be with you. I am contributing to GQ Sports for the next few months. I do not think I'll have anything to do with cover shoots or staging or fashion in any way, shape, or form, because I don't have any idea about fashion. So the arrangement of me and GQ in the first place is funny on its face, given that. But yeah, thank you for the reminder. I just Googled it. I'd forgotten the full impact, the full, just the aura, the mystique of this photo of Paul George, George Hill, Lance Stevenson, David West, Roy Hibbert. Like, this is fantastic. How do Pacer fans think about this now? Do they look back on it fondly? Is it a fun memory, or is this just considered like this is when everything just went to shit and we've never been the same since?
The latter, mostly. When I was looking this up, one of my friends, Derek Kramer, wrote a story about the change when this came out. And the first tweet it says, "Dad, when did it all go wrong for the Pacers?" Me, takes 3 shots of bourbon. It all started with this damn photo shoot. And it's a picture from GQ. So it's definitely a turning point. And it's funny that they were all gone pretty quickly. And then Lance was the first one back. Now George Hill is back again. So maybe it'll just never end.
And could be gone again. I think George Hill's one of those guys. Every franchise has one of these guys where George Hill's just going to perpetually return, be waived again, traded again, come back again. Like, that's for the next 20 years. George Hill will just be kind of floating in and out of the Pacers roster. But yeah, Paul George and George Hill, the only guys left in the NBA from this group. It is a rather incredible photo. I love it.
It is, for a franchise on the ascent at the time, too. If George Hill ever buttons the top 4 buttons of a button down again, I think something has to happen in the Pacers mystique. We're going to talk about the current Pacers, though, Howard. It's just fitting that the GQ overlap happens once again. And this is an interesting time for this Pacers team because they won more games than they thought they would at 35. And Kevin Pritchard, their president, at his end-of-season presser was talking about, the parallel paths they have going forward. They would like to get better, be potentially a playoff team as soon as next season. They know they have Tyrese Haliburton and a strong foundation. But at the same time, if you start to build the walls before the foundation's done, things can crumble pretty quickly. So they have to figure out that tricky line between adding to what they have in a young core and beginning to go for it and get better, because they haven't been in the postseason since the bubble season. They haven't played a playoff game in Gainbridge Fieldhouse since 2019. So balancing all of these things at the same time is critical. To you, when you look at this team in the season that they just had, what do you feel like, especially as a rebuild is kind of early on, is the importance of setting a foundation versus kind of putting your foot on the accelerator and going for it?
Well, I think the foundation is there. like the thing is with every team that is in some, one of these weird, middle ground, trying to figure out their, like I just did the Locked On Wizards, and of course they're in. It's great that this is the podcast for the Pacers because Kevin Pritchard, of course, runs the Pacers, and Kevin Pritchard is the one who, to my recollection, at the Sloan Conference many years ago, coined the phrase "treadmill of mediocrity."
That's right.
And the Wizards are firmly on that treadmill. The Wizards have rebranded the treadmill as the Wizards treadmill of mediocrity. Like they just should have their logo on it at this point. So it's funny because these are teams with the same record. And the reason I bring up the Wizards, not just because I just did the podcast, but also like you can be in the same place in the pecking order in the standings and be in very different places as a franchise. The Pacers are on the way up. The Wizards are just stuck. The foundation is there. Tyrese Halliburton is your foundation. Tyrese Halliburton and Mathurin, Nembhard, this young core, and it's a very young team. There's a foundation there. The first thing you're trying to do if you're rebuilding or if you are just lost in the wilderness, find a guy you can build around. Well, they've got it. They already have that player. So they're ahead of the game in that regard. Why have the Oklahoma City Thunder gone from team that we thought was like, oh, they're tanking, they're tearing down, they're rebuilding, they're whatever, to suddenly, oh man, Thunder are going to get Chet Holmgren back next year. Thunder still have all these picks. Thunder have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who's going to be make one of the All-NBA teams when those are announced sometime soon. They're set. They're good to go. Like they're not going to compete for a championship next season probably, but the Thunder have bounced back very quickly because in having to trade your old friend Paul George, they got Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in addition to all the other stuff. You have Tyrese Halliburton thanks to that Sabonis trade. And again, like credit to Kevin Pritchard and his staff. Like it goes, I won't say unnoticed. It certainly doesn't go unnoticed in NBA circles, but because the Pacers obviously smaller market and kind of below the radar and have been, not a powerhouse for the last few years, I think some of these things get overlooked, but like, you had the Nate McMillan years where they were perpetually overachieving, always exceeding expectations. And some of that it's a combination of things. But the point here is Kevin Pritchard and his staff have proven time and again, they can make the best of a difficult situation, whether it's Paul George asking out and flipping him for Oladipo and Sabonis, flipping Sabonis then for Halliburton. A lot of these just opportunistic moves. And the result of it is, and some smart drafting is, they've got a good young core. I don't know what the upside is. I don't know what their ceiling is. I don't know that anybody does. But can Tyrese Halliburton is he a number one or is he a number two? Like that's a question that I was talking to somebody else in the league about this recently. And they were saying, that like, can Halliburton be your number one for the next 5 to 10 years? Can Mathurin grow into a true number two? Or are you still trying to find somebody else who is kind of that foundational player? These are foundational players, but there are different kinds of foundational players, right? Like the Wizards have tried to build themselves around Bradley Beal. Bradley Beal's probably best as your number two or your number three, except he's a number one and being paid like, a Hall of Famer.
A number zero.
But something. Yeah. So it's problematic. So everybody's got their guy, but if that guy is miscast as a true number one, when really he's just your number one, because it's the best you could do, that's where you get in trouble. But Halliburton, the whole league loves Tyrese. You cannot find anybody in the NBA who doesn't love Tyrese Halliburton and the potential of Halliburton, what he already is, what he could still become, his overall comportment, his game, everything. So that's the good news. The challenges come now, but they've got great tools, right? Like 3 first-round picks and 2 seconds in this draft. They're slotted 7th right now. They could still jump up to the top 4. They could get number 1. They could end up being, home to Victor Wembanyama. They can package their picks. There's a lot of optionality here, right? They've got cap room. You're probably not, in the NBA today, especially in a smaller market, you're not necessarily saying, well, we've got 25 million in cap room, we'll just go sign a max player. Like that's not the way it works very often. But it gives you the ability to make lopsided trades and to soak up other people's contracts, to be a facilitator, whatever it may be. They've got a lot of flexibility. So that's the good news.
Hey guys, quick little break so I can talk to you about Nissan's 2023 Nissan Aria with the Nissan Most Electric Player of the Week. We're going with Miles Turner after Kalen Cooper and I broke down his season yesterday. His last full week playing this season, 4 games, 19 points, 6.3 rebounds per game on 63% shooting with some solid defense, and was huge in a win over Toronto in that spin. Miles Turner, a great season. Listen to that show yesterday. And he is the electric player of the week this week because he played electric, brilliantly fierce, fiercely elegant, stunningly powerful, and electrically powerful. He was delivering on duality on both ends of the floor, just like the perfect SUV crossover, the 2023 Nissan Ariya, which packs penny-to-your-seat power and premium intelligence onto one electric vehicle. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya, the electric vehicle for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. Let's also quickly talk about BetterHelp. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp, and BetterHelp can be perfect for anybody who may be needing more online. For me, recently, I learned about myself that, I really need to make lists to get through my day and have more structure in my life, a to-do list or something like that. And getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. And therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we just don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we go through and talk through those things. And BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. And that's where BetterHelp can come in. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire, get matched with a licensed therapist, and switch therapists anytime with no additional charge. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Where I kind of trip over my own feet thinking about this is I agree that they have really good foundational pieces, and they were 23-18 at the halfway point. Like, if they extrapolate that for a full season, you're the 6th seed, right? You're a playoff level team. Sure. I feel like internally, if that happens, you feel good about the chances of taking a step forward and being good next year. At the same time, if your core is, and the 3 guys on the roster you'd think of your core are Andrew Nembhard, Tyrese Haliburton, and Benedict Mathurin, the oldest one of them is 23. Like, your timeline is still a long-term timeline, even if those players are good now. So I kind of get why they want to toe that line between a long-term, set more foundation approach and a more rapid growth approach. But they were good. They were good this year at times, to the point that is kind of a tricky balance to strike. And if you jump up to 1, like you said, is possible. Like, now your timeline is totally different because Victor Wembanyama is potentially on your team. But as they kind of navigate those decisions, I feel like they have enough foundational stuff that you can go if you want to. But I also am hesitant to just say that's the smartest decision, just because so much of their core is, 1, still relatively fresh together, and 2, it's all young, right? It's all 23 and under kind of players. And they have, like, Miles Turner's obviously fantastic. He's 27. That's not old. And if they want to count him as part of the core, then great. Then that's another one, and he's older. I just feel like your timeline is more based around players who have a lot of team control over for a lot of years.
Yes. And, to your earlier question, this premise of, like, when do you hit the gas, right? When do you go all in? I think circumstances dictate that to a large degree, right? Like, if you wanted to just say, we like our young core, we want to just give them room to grow, we're not going to do anything dramatic. We'll find some veterans to bring in to complement them and serve as kind of, rotation guys and mentors and whatever. You can keep going down that path. When we talk about, like, when to hit the accelerator and to be all in on, like, no, this is the year where we need to make the big leap forward. First of all, you're right. Like, if Haliburton doesn't get hurt, maybe they make the playoffs anyway, or they're at least in the play-in and maybe securing 7th or 8th. I don't know if they're surpassing the Nets for that 6th and final guaranteed spot, but whatever. They were in really good shape, and if they just stayed healthy, or if Haliburton had just stayed healthy, it's a different end to the season. So you could take that and say, look, that is the basis for saying we're going to still go slow and steady here. Some low risk, veterans that we bring in over the summer to complement them, but nothing dramatic. The dramatic part will be, I think, dictated, or that next big leap will be dictated more by circumstance. What if you leap up to top 3? What if you leap up to the top 1 pick in the draft? That changes the calculus.
Right.
Even, and then if you don't, we're going into another summer where, and I don't want to go too far down this road, and I'm not suggesting the Pacers should be keeping an eye or be in these sweepstakes, but we're all wondering when is Dame Lillard going to ask out, or is he going to? Trae Young just had a really amazing game last night, so it's a weird time to talk about it. But up until that game, everybody around the league was wondering, and are still wondering to an extent, how much longer are the Hawks going to roll with Trae Young? Will Trae Young become available? Will the Wizards finally decide to put Bradley Beal on the market? Does it even matter given the size of his contract? Is he even movable? Is he even really somebody that teams want to chase given the contract and his health situation? Are the Timberwolves going to move on from Karl Anthony Towns? This is the game we play in the NBA now, right? 365 days a year. Who's the next star to ask out to, the next discontented star who wants to move on, or the next team that's just discontented with their star, or maybe it's mutual discontent and everybody's just ready to move on. Because that's when we talk about the big leap forward, you either keep going organically. The Thunder have mostly, done it that way, right? They just keep assembling young players, and they draft really well and they develop really well. And they made a smart trade that got them Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and off to the races. They didn't have to make, the dramatic move was actually a tear down move, not a build up move. The dramatic move was the Paul George one. They haven't done anything dramatic since. So for the Pacers, their dramatic move was, finally breaking up the Sabonis Turner tandem and getting a franchise point guard who may just be their franchise player, period. I don't know that we need, anything dramatic in the near term here. I think they're in good shape to just kind of keep building methodically.
Yeah, that all makes sense too. And they do have 3 firsts this year, lots of picks incoming in futures if one of those star players does become available. And lo and behold, I don't think they would be tripping all over themselves for Dame or for Trae because they have a point guard. But Cat would be a good fit and a good segue into my next thing I want to get to with you, and that's what do the Pacers still need positionally? And I think it's fairly obvious, although there's a couple ways to look at this to me, right? Kevin Pritchard, when he was asked about it, said, they have a bunch of positional designations internally, hybrids, wings, fours, whatever phrase they use, that kind of player, right? Someone between 6'6" and 6'10" who can do stuff on both ends. They have some guys who played wing who are too small. They had some wings who aren't, starting level talent. They need wings. I also have a little bit of a soft spot for the fact that with their identity being based around Haliburton being so strong with the ball and being able to drive and shoot in a way that no one else on this team can, right? They have a couple guys who can get to the paint, but none of them can create. And they have a couple guys who can shoot, but they can't really attack the basket. With so much of their identity being predicated around what he does, another guy, even a slightly lesser talent who can do that, I think would go a long way for them too. But in your eyes, and I think most people have the same answer, but where do you feel like this team needs roster-wise to get better next year?
There's obviously a whole power forward, but I don't feel like we're not in a positionless era. I don't like the idea that it's positionless. We're positionally fluid era, right? So, yes. When you're looking at what a team needs these days, I think it's less about strictly a positional label than it is the role that you play out on the court, right? So if you're they've got plenty of shooting. but if you're a team that doesn't have shooting, you're looking for shooters, and it doesn't really matter whether you needed a point guard or a power forward or whatever. You're looking for shooting because you've got, like you say, you've got a great star who can create a lot, but you just don't have the spacing, whatever. You know what I mean? Like it's to me, it's more, if you don't have enough, perimeter defense, you're looking for perimeter D. There is to an extent still a need for like smalls and bigs, right? Like if you don't have rim protection, you might still be shopping for rim protection. I think for the Pacers, I'm not even so much thinking about it in terms of like, are there boxes to check, shooting, defense, rim protection, shot creation, whatever. It's more that you've got young players who are going to keep evolving, and some of these things may just take care of themselves along the way. It takes a while for young players to learn how to play defense at an NBA level, and to be intuitive about it, and to be tied together, and to be precise. So even with defense, and look, they ranked pretty low in both offensive and defensive efficiency. I didn't look at the breakdowns for when Tyrese actually played, but I'm sure it was a little better on both counts. And and Miles Turner keeps missing 20 games a season. So I love Miles Turner. Miles Turner is a really fun player and really impactful when he's out there and playing for long stretches. But as you and your listeners know well, like you just never know how much you're going to get from him in a given season. Can he stay healthy? But if he does, like that's another big, potential question mark answered, right? You have rim protection and you have a big who can space the floor at the other end. I don't know that there's this, like, if I'm Kevin Pritchard and his $25 million, give or take, of cap room, I'm not even exactly sure what I'm shopping for this summer, to be honest. Because I don't want to over index on anything while I've got young players who I think are evolving.
One more break here, guys, so I can talk to you about eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part of you and every part of your vehicle fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part will fit or your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. I think if I had to over-index on something, it's defense. just that in general.
Sure.
Position be damned to an extent, because this is the second year in a row from the All-Star break to the end, 30th in defense. Last, worst. Fiend, no one worse, right? And then I get why. Some guys were shut down both years, and they weren't particularly talented on that end anyway. But last suggests you have a long way to go, not even just like a plug it with one guy and you're ready situation. So some of that is they don't have size, right? They play four guards a lot. Some of that's that they just don't have anybody who can be a perimeter stopper at all. So if they are targeting anyone at any position, if they can't guard, I feel like they're just out, of the list, because you can accentuate your positives and try to lean all in and be the best offense and be the Kings, basically, right? Be the best offense in the 29th defense and roll to a 3 seed. But that's historically not a strategy that many teams do or works in the postseason, right? And we'll see if it does for the Kings or not going forward. But I think they want a little more balance there, and Pritchard alluded to it. Rick Carlisle's alluded to it, right? They want to add more defense to this roster, to this team going forward. Naturally, positionally, I feel like if that's a 4, even better, of course. But he said this too, like every single team wants that player, right? If you're 6'8" and you can guard, you have a role on an NBA team, especially if you have any sort of offensive skills. So they're expensive and they have cap room and they have trade assets, but they're hard to get. There's a reason that the reported asking prices for OG Anunoby and Mikal Bridges were an arm, a leg, a soul, and every first round draft pick you have. So they have all those things, but it's not as easy as just let's call him Masai Ujiri or Sean Marks and get this done. So I'll be fascinated to see how they prioritize certain skills and positions, just because the stuff they want's the hardest to get, and what the timeline they decide on will be a very relevant factor here. It's just an interesting time for them to build forward.
No question. And listen, you mentioned Anunoby and Bridges, and like, man, how much of the season did everybody spend talking about, the potential Anunoby trade and who could get him and what it would take and everything. Bridges did move, but Bridges moved in a trade for Kevin freaking Durant.
Right.
Like, Cam Johnson, by the way, also in that trade, and a nice lengthy wing with with size and shooting ability, and Cam Johnson's a free agent. So could the Pacers go chase a Cam Johnson? Again, it goes to your original question: is it time to go all out yet for and he's not going to be an all-star, but like a player who's really, really good and complements the guys you have and would be a nice fit. I don't know. I like that. I would love to be a fly on the wall for conversations like that with a team that's in, like, say, the Pacers position. Like, you're not one Cam Johnson away from the championship, obviously, but and I don't want to fixate just on him, but he is a free agent this summer. I assume the Nets are going to go all out to keep him. They obviously traded Kevin Durant to get him and Bridges and all this, so I don't expect to see him anywhere else. But what's he worth? What's he worth to a team like the Pacers that probably wants to make a big step forward next season? Doesn't have to be a 50-win team yet. Doesn't have to be a champ, a contender yet. And again, you're not a Cam Johnson away. You're probably, I'm not sure who you are away. You're a bigger player. But But like whether it's Cam Johnson or whether, look, every signal from Toronto is that the Raptors still are not going to make, they're still not going to do some tear down, and they're probably still not going to make OG Anunoby available. But if he were available tomorrow, what does that look like for a team like the Pacers? And again, is it the right time to give up, multiple picks and some young players? I tend to think no. I kind of think you're still kind of, as I said earlier, maybe slow walking it a little bit. I kind of want to see what a full year of health from my guys looks like, and what the steps forward that they're taking just in terms of just natural evolution as young players, because it's a really young roster. And again, I'm going maybe for mid-tier players, guys who are costing, 5, 8, 10, 12 million a year or something, not the 20, 25 million a year range yet. I just don't know if you're there yet. The Pacers may have a much different view of that than I do.
Well, even just learn, this is a former Pacer, so I'll just use him as an example. Like Doug McDermott, right? $14 million wing. Like, just seeing how a wing of that size and value helps your team would let you know if you want to invest more or less in the position, for example, or if shooting's more or less important to you, right? Like, that's still really valuable for their team. But you kind of nailed the crux of where I want to finish this, and that is internal development can be just as important as adding the right players, right? They talked about that a lot with improving their defense in their exit interviews. That obviously they need to get better at that. But in general, for a team that finished the season with 10 guys 25 or younger, being better next year than you were this year is extremely important, right? And there's a lot of questions about some of their backup bigs, some of their younger wings, and there's less questions about their top-end talent. But those players getting better will be critical to the next steps of the Pacers if they want to be as good as they've said they want to be. So, look, maybe the answer is just Tyrese Haliburton because he's amazing. But to you, Howard, which Pacers players development, you can name more than one if you want, but would be the most important to this team being what they want to be at their best?
I mean, so Haliburton is the franchise star now, right? I think for the foreseeable future, they will go as far as he can take them. I have no concern about what he is or what he could become, right? Like, I think there's just an incredible amount of potential there. And it's funny because, like in his draft year, obviously what he went, go 13th, I think.
Yes.
A lot of teams passing him because they were doing the usual thing that teams do, that scouts do, that the talent assessors do, which is like, well, he doesn't jump out of the gym and he's not the fastest and he's not the quickest. And like, you're looking for those physical traits. And he's got obviously great physical traits in terms of height and length and everything, especially for the position. And but they fool themselves on the, well, you're looking for the quick first step, or the guy who just blows by guys and then just dunks on guys, and it's this this trap that we get into. All that said, because he wasn't considered like a high profile athletic, like high potential athletic guy, like those weren't the traits that carried him into the NBA or have carried him to success. Maybe there is some sort of, I guess, theoretical ceiling on how great he would be overall. But he's such a smart player and has done, I think, just such a great job of developing his skill set and becoming, I don't think even people were sure if he was a true point guard coming out when the Kings first drafted him. So when a guy has that kind of early evolution, I kind of, my faith in that person's ability to continue evolving and adding to their game, and he's already exceeded expectations. He's already gone way beyond what anybody expected. I believe he can still, like, there's more there to mine. So then I'm thinking more about, like, Mathurin growing into, like we said, a true number 2 if Haliburton's your number 1, and Nembhard. I don't know if that's, again, it's not one guy. When you're this far down the standings, it's all of your young players. Like, I don't know there's any single one of them that's the most important to develop. I think to some extent it's the guys that have yet to walk through the door. There's going to be some,
maybe so.
Right? Like, there's going to be some internal growth, but I mean, if every single player on this roster reached their fullest potential, are they a 50-win team yet? Or are they still looking for outside help? They're probably still looking for outside help. So, I think that's kind of how I broadly view it.
The 50 number was said at Kevin Pritchard's ex interview. 50. He
brought it up.
He said it. He said, how do we go from 25 to 35, which they did, and then 35 to 45 or 50? And 45 hit my ear just right. Maybe so. 50. I went, whoa, wow, that's quite the jump next year.
Not only that, but I mean, forget the number of wins, the math of it, how many wins you have to add to get there. To me, it's more just about like 50 is an indicator. It's a threshold in this league of teams that are contenders. You're not, it's very, very rare, if ever, that you're contending if you're not at least a fit. Like, that's how you know who to take seriously. 55 and up, definitely. 50 wins and up, you are probably a top 4, top 5 type team that has some potential for a deep playoff run. And I'm not sure that they're ready for that yet, unless they are, in fact, going shopping in a major way this summer with the cap room and or trading draft picks or whatever it may be. So that would be pretty bold. I mean, look. They've got to pass Chicago. I don't know which direction Chicago is going right now, frankly, so they might.
Does Chicago know what direction Chicago is going right now?
No, Chicago has no idea. I have a great deal of faith in Masai Ujiri and Bobby Webster in Toronto, so I'm sure they'll get it right, whatever they're doing, but we still don't know exactly what they're doing. It does seem pretty clear that they do not intend to tear down. So you're trying to leapfrog Toronto. The Hawks, I don't know what the Hawks are doing or where they're going yet. The Heat, I mean, just when we were ready to write them off, now they're on the verge of pulling the rare 8-1 upset in the first round. The Nets, like, are all the way up at 6, like way out of reach of the Pacers, as we glance at the standings. But the Nets, I don't that's my backyard. I don't know where the Nets are going either. Like, they made 2 pretty good trades considering they were under the gun with Durant and Kyrie Irving, but I don't think a Mikal Bridges, Spencer Dinwiddie core is leading them back to a top 6 finish without making moves this summer. And I'm sure they're going to make moves. And then meanwhile, we alluded to Washington. They're in the same range as the Pacers right now. I don't know where they're going to go under their new GM. The Magic are on their way up, seemingly. The Pistons are way back there, but they should be on their way up with Cade Cunningham coming back and room to, they'll have a top pick. Maybe they get Wembanyama. They've got cap room. So there's, getting to 50, like there's the teams you have to leapfrog and there's the teams that are in your same range who are all jockeying with you too. And so it's interesting because where the Pacers end up to an extent depends on what all those teams I just mentioned do this summer as well.
Yeah, it's hard to see that. Maybe Chicago is the obvious one, but it's hard to see the team in front of them that's just like, yep, they can catch that team very easily next year. Right? There's not that one. And to cap off the internal development question, I think you're right to say it's basically every player. I would think it's Mathurin because if I had to put it on one guy, like I'm really high on Halliburton. I think the Pacers are too. And when you have that level of IQ, like you're going to be good. Your floor is exceedingly high. Mathurin, I want to see what he can be, right? Is he just 20 points per game score kind of guy who doesn't add a ton elsewhere? Can he add some playmaking? Can he add some defense? He said over and over again, I want to be the best two-way player in the league. And like, that is a rare proclamation from a young player who enters the league, right? So what does that look like for him next year? What does he work on this summer? Where does that development take him? Because if he is that player, that is obviously significant, of course. And predicting any one player to be the best two-way player in the league is a dumb bet. But if he can be as good as he wants to be, then they clearly have two dudes for some sort of run for a chase for 50 wins at some point, maybe not next year. So I just think him next year, his ascent, and how he fits with Halliburton, because quite frankly, we've seen lineups with them do well together, but those two specifically have kind of had a rocky fit at times. That will be huge to me if they want to do that ascent and catch some of those teams that you just said, because it's not clear exactly how else they're going to do it unless they get, like we've kind of alluded to, someone awesome that player to be named later, as they're called them in baseball. Whoever that is a big part of it too.
Yeah, no, I think you laid it out perfectly. And that's the thing. Like the nice thing is, if you think you already have your backcourt for the next, I hate to say, it used to be in this league, you'd say like for the next 10 years, there is no next 10 years. Like 5 years is the new 10 years.
10 years
in the NBA.
GQ photo shoot. That was 10 years ago.
But there was a time when you planned on like a 7 to 10 year window. You'd say if you drafted a guy and you control his draft rights and then his extension, his rookie scale contract and the extension that comes off that and everything else, you always planned on these 10-year windows. I'm going to say always planned on. You could plan on, if you got really great players, these are guys we're going to have for the next 10 years, next 10 to 15 years. the cycle is so fast in the NBA now. Everything is a 3 to 5 year window. Everything's accelerated. All that said, knowing that you have Halliburton and Mathurin at a minimum, and a tandem that can grow together, that could be foundational, that you've got your backcourt set. There's a lot to be said for knowing that and being able to build off of that. And so I think you're right. What is Mathurin's, evolution, and the fact that he's, talking about wanting to be a two-way player. Yes, absolutely agree. Is a phenomenal sign. There are a lot of guys who come in and obviously they just want to get their numbers. They just want to score. They just want to shoot. They don't necessarily want to develop, their offhand. They don't want to develop as playmakers. They don't want to develop as defenders. If he becomes a fully realized, well-rounded player, tag team partner for Halliburton, they're that much further along. But yeah, it's always fun, interesting to see like guys come back the next year. Like you start seeing in training camp and preseason, like what they've added. That to me is the true mark of the great players in this league. Like they're never satisfied with what they came in with. Every year they're coming back with something else. And then there are guys who you see just kind of go like, no, I'm good. I can shoot. I don't need to develop as a playmaker. It happens. So it's good to see and hear their young players having that kind of more constructive long-term view.
Agreed. We'll see where it actually takes them, but off to a good start in a rebuild. Howard Beck, thank you for the time. He is with Locked On Network for a couple more months, I believe. And just this week, right? Knicks, Heat, Wizards, Grizzlies, Pacers is your 5?
I think that was it. I think it was 6 total. I've lost track. And the national show.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a lot. But it's fun. It's great. It's great making the rounds. Been fun talking to all of you guys, and we'll be doing so as part of the Locked On Network for the next couple of months. So thanks for having me, Tony. Appreciate it.
And where can people find your writing over the course of the rest of the postseason, as we've alluded to several times through the show? But you got to do your own promotion, man.
So writing for GQ Sports through the playoffs, through the finals, maybe into the summer a little bit. All of my work, you can find me on Twitter at Howard Beck, and you can find all of my written work on my Authory page. That's author with a Y on the end. So authory.com/Howard Beck. All of my GQ stuff, my Sports Illustrated stuff from the past, my New York Times bylines, Bleacher Report, everything I've written for the last 20 years or so on my Authory page. So authory.com/Howard Beck.
How long till we stop promoting our Twitter handles? What would you give it?
Ooh, man. I have thought several times in the last few months that day might be coming, and each time it's like, no, I guess we're hanging out for a little while longer. I am set up on Mastodon just in case, so we'll see.
I used to tell people to say where people can find you on Twitter. I skip that question now because you might not be able to find that person on Twitter, even if you want to find them on Twitter.
You might find 50 other versions of yourself on Twitter, all of which have blue checks, despite the fact that they're not you.
The impersonators are out to get us once again. Howard, thank you for the time. Everybody, back next week. Of course, it's May. It's draft lottery month, as big as it gets for the Pacers in their current state. I'll do a whole show in French if they get the number 1 pick. I got to do it. We'll see where this goes. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Have a fantastic day. We'll see you soon.